Welcome back to the Buddhist Podcast. My name is Noah Cease. Today we're going to talk about something that has just absolutely taken TikTok and social media by storm: shadow work. Now, shadow work is a kind of difficult topic to talk about for a lot of different reasons, and I have no idea why this thing is just absolutely taken over completely. I've had multiple clients in my practice come to me and ask me about shadow work. It all seems to be coming from this journal that is available on Amazon called Shadow Work. I forget the person who authored it. I did kind of try to do a little bit digging. She seems to be a self-help author and completely unqualified to talk about shadow work. Nothing personal, just from what I've seen on her bio. And here's the primary reason I say that. Shadow work sounds catchy. It sounds like some kind of interesting, mystical, secret wisdom kind of thing. When I was looking at the person who made this journal that has just taken over TikTok, and reading her bio and reading a couple of things that she said, or some of her training, first of all, she's not a clinical mental health counselor. Second of all, she has no training beyond a undergraduate level education and a couple of certifications. Third of all, she doesn't mention Carl Jung or Jungian analysis at all in her background, training, and education. Why does that matter? Well, it is Carl Jung who invented shadow work, or at least coined the term shadow work, and it's from him that anyone's even heard the phrase shadow work. So, I have an issue with TikTok influencers, social media influencers on mental health topics for exactly this reason. Now, I haven't bought the journal. I don't know what's in it. And I'm sure there's probably some really great prompts in there to help people think about their lives in terms that they wouldn't normally. Apparently, she's a fairly successful, kind of self-help author. So, okay, great. But I want to set the story straight on what shadow work is, what it is not, and why you really need to be careful when you're digging into something like shadow work. Carl Jung would be absolutely appalled at the idea of people starting shadow work by buying a prompt journal online and trying to do these things themselves. So let's get into why it matters, and if you really are interested in shadow work, how to kind of go about it the right way. So first and foremost, I want to break down what the shadow is. Again, this is all with a history of Carl Jung and his psychoanalysis, Jungian analysis. So Carl Jung believed that every person has a shadow and a persona. A persona is the mask that people wear to be seen in a certain way. It's how they want to present themselves so that other people will see them in a particular way. The shadow is exactly the opposite of that. It's all of the emotions, thoughts, feelings that we have, that we have shame around, that we feel guilt around, or certain instances where people shamed us. So either we are shaming ourselves, or we were made to feel ashamed of it from, just living and other people's reactions and responses, or what we were directly told to feel shame about and guilt about. It's all of those incredibly uncomfortable and more or less ugly aspects of our psyche that we desperately try to hide from other people. They are literally the worst parts about ourselves. So, again, from a Jungian perspective, the goal of shadow work is to identify first and foremost what lurks in the shadow, how it might be eking out in our daily life and impacting ourselves and the people that we love. And then how can we integrate that to an authentic part of ourselves and thereby draw upon the power and energy that lies within the shadow that can help us be more of an autonomous, confident agent that can take control of our own lives and situations that we find ourselves in. So this is not a glamorous, feel-good, self-reflective process. This is an intense, emotional journey that will be done for the rest of your life and is not something that's just completed with, a few journal prompts. Again, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. It's not that I'm against the journals that are out there. Again, I don't even know what's in them. But just the idea that this was written by someone who doesn't acknowledge Carl Jung or Jungian analysis in any way whatsoever, and has just taken by storm. Like we need a little bit better context and understanding of what these things really are. The risk of going at these things and investigating your shadow alone without proper coping skills, without proper guidance, is that you can fall into the abyss of your own subconscious. And what I mean by that is that as you start to notice and acknowledge the worst parts about yourself, you can spiral into this depressive state where all you think you are those worst parts about yourself. And if you don't think that that's possible, then you're not taking shadow work seriously enough. It's not enough to just say, oh yeah, there's some things I felt shame about. Oh yeah, I get angry sometimes. It's like, that's not shadow work. That's just acknowledging a human being experience. So these are very, very in-depth and often frightening and overpowering forces of your subconscious that you have never taken a look at in your lifetime, that you have suppressed over years and years and years of trying to avoid admitting how terrible of a person you might actually be at the core, because we all have those parts to our own psyche. That's how we recognize them when we see them outside of ourselves. So as far as the kind of shadow work itself, what I normally have clients do who are interested in shadow work is I have them start by taking out a sheet of paper or printing out a table that has 3 different columns. And one column is the persona, one column is the authentic self, and one column is the shadow. Now, before I have them even start to think about what might be in the shadow, I have them fill out the persona first so that the individual gets an idea of all of the things that they do in order to be seen by others in a particular way. This can include things that you specifically make a point to tell people that you want someone else to know about you. This also might be the things about yourself that you hide from other people, the things that you don't want them to know because you're concerned that then they might see you in a different light. So both of those sides are part of the persona. But so is the attire. What clothes do you wear? What jewelry do you wear? Tattoos that you may or may not have. The kind of car that you drive, the way your home is decorated, the way your bedroom's decorated. These are all aspects of the persona. They are outward projections of how you would like to be seen, ideally. And then the next step, after outlining those things, is then to take an honest stock of, who do you think you are authentically? When no one's looking, when there's no pressure to perform or be seen as something, maybe who you are with your absolute best friend, your closest friend, family members that you absolutely love, or just who you are authentically alone. What are the activities that you do when you know that no one's looking? When you can let all of your walls down, who are you? What do you look like? What things do you enjoy? What activities do you partake in? What books do you read? What pictures do you look at? All of these things that make you who you feel like you authentically are. And that's the self. Now, only after engaging in both of these, the persona and the self, and the individual has gained an understanding of the process of bringing consciousness to different aspects of their personality, do we then begin to dip our toes into the shadow. Because along this process, you start allowing your mind to open up to the idea that there are parts of you that you are afraid to show other people. That wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world if people found out, but that you hesitate on. And this trickles down into the subconscious, that you're teaching yourself, maybe it's okay to admit that there are some things about you that other people may dislike. So this has this kind of ripple effect, and that's why we start with these things, and that's why we do this process very slow and with a degree of understanding of how to cope with difficult situations. Because as you start to look more and more deeply into the shadow, it can become very overwhelming, and you could become flooded with these negative emotions that have been lurking in the shadow for so long. You might notice yourself becoming more irritable, less patient with people, less patient with yourself. You may start to feel hatred towards yourself, or hatred towards other people or other things or the world. And if you don't know how to take a step back, bring yourself down to the present moment, then you can very, very quickly lose yourself in that subconscious material. So some of those coping skills, reminding yourself of who you authentically are, reminding yourself that you are more than just the bad things about yourself, using things like breathing techniques and daily meditation, engaging in listening to music or doing activities or playing, all the things that you enjoy doing on a daily basis that literally make you feel joyful. So have a list of these things ready. Make sure that you are actually doing these things on a daily basis before you ever even start looking in the shadow. You want to make sure that you know how to engage in the joyful, wonderful parts of life before you start diving in to the deepest, darkest, scariest parts of your own mind. So, having said all that, this last part of actually taking a look into the shadow, you have to ask yourself some tough questions. Again, maybe these journals out there, maybe they do have some of these questions in there, but again, I don't know. So the questions that I have people answer are things like, when did you experience hatred? What moments in your life have you felt the most ashamed of being who you are? When were you made to feel guilty? When have you felt enraged? When have you wished someone would die or be seriously hurt? And really exploring these circumstances that those emotions and thoughts were had and experienced. This is really difficult, again, if you take it seriously, because these are the things that people don't want to feel. They don't want to experience them. And as soon as you start thinking about them, guess what? That emotion pops up, and now you're experiencing it again as if it were happening all over again. This is why you need to have strong coping skills and an idea of what it's like to investigate your own memories before you do this kind of work. Anyway, so as you go through this process, what you're doing is you're mapping out the worst moments of your life, the worst feelings that you've experienced, the worst encounters with other people that you've ever had, as a way of bringing those otherwise kind of suppressed or unconscious things back into consciousness willingly. That maps out that territory and reminds you that those things never left, that they've always been there, and that you have done everything you can to make sure they stay hidden. So what's the point of all this? What's the point of uncovering these otherwise, unconscious or very, very difficult emotions and memories? Well, how many times have you yourself lashed out at somebody, just snapped at anger or frustration, displeasure, or you felt, just completely under threat in a very otherwise normal circumstance? Or how many times have you been on the receiving end and felt and be made to feel utterly small and incapable and absolutely powerless because of someone else's anger, retribution, rage, and so on? All of those instances are a product of the shadow being unexplored territory. And we all do it. We all snap. We all have our breaking points, and they come out in different ways. Maybe it's road rage. Maybe it's yelling at a clerk in the grocery store, or, some other, shopping place or whatever. The point is that the shadow does not stay hidden. It comes out and it lashes out in very aggressive ways. It can lead to drug addiction, avoidance, depression, explosive episodes of anger, blackouts, physical assault, abuse, any number of horrible things that people do to one another. That is a result of the shadow. So these are not, again, I cannot stress this enough. This is not just a simple little walk in the park, fun journaling reflection process. Okay, this is the deep, committed acknowledgement that within you is a horrible monster capable of the most devastating actions against yourself and other people imaginable. You are that thing. And if you think that you're not, then you really need to take stock, and it may be most important for you to do this kind of work. So you break down the person that you want to be seen as, who you think you actually are, and then you recount these tremendously emotionally powerful episodes of your life that involve feelings of everything that you dislike, everything that you don't want to experience. Feeling utterly powerless, feeling completely betrayed or ashamed of, or afraid of, or guilty about. All of these things, they need to be mapped out, and that is the shadow work. So again, by exploring these things, you are preventing the shadow from lashing out on its own in unexpected ways that then just contributes to feelings of more guilt, of more profound anger and resentment and sadness at your own inability to constrain those parts that you like least about yourself. So when those things are mapped out, and once you accept that they are a legitimate part of you, well, now you're keeping your eyes open to those terrible forces. And the acceptance with that, the acceptance that those things are real, they exist, and they are a part of you, that begins the process of integration of those elements and of that fiery energy that now, because you're conscious of, you can respond differently to the external circumstances that would have otherwise triggered that shadow response. And not only that, but now you can channel that incredibly enormous amount of power and energy when you need it. When you are facing terrible difficulties in your life and you don't know what to do, you'll be able to channel those energies into a controlled and productive manner. So that's what shadow work truly is. It's the integration of all the most terrible things that you've done, that you are afraid to look at, or that have happened to you and you're afraid to look at. So again, this is a process that should not be taken lightly, and it should not be taken alone. Having guidance from a Jungian analyst or someone who is trained and familiar with Jungian analysis is so important. Certainly doing stuff like this on your own, without coping skills, without the ability to hold firm to your reality of who you are setting yourself up for some very serious consequences and potentially falling into the the abyss that is your unconscious, your subconscious mind. Again, I'm not against this, personal reflection. I'm not against journals and prompts to get you thinking about your life in different ways. I am against someone blowing up on social media, some influencer or self-help author who is stealing an enormous aspect of a whole category of mental health and clinical analysis and removing it from that context and saying, here, now anybody capable of reading and writing can do this kind of work because it sounds catchy, it sounds exciting. That's dangerous. That's what it is. It's just dangerous. Now, I don't think most people will have an issue with doing the journal because it's probably not legitimate shadow work. So again, just be cautious about those kinds of things. Just because something's, catching fire on social media does not mean that it's actually safe to do. It doesn't mean that it's accurate. It doesn't mean that it's well researched. And again, in this case, with these shadow work journals I've been seeing, the author is not qualified to produce a product like this. So be careful. Please take care of yourself and be mindful of the information that you're consuming about mental health, and especially about trending topics in mental health like shadow work. Again, I don't even know why this took off like it did. But anyway, there it is. If you're interested in shadow work, learn about Carl Jung, learn about his ideas, learn about Jungian analysis, and then decide if you really want to pursue that avenue. Take all the precaution that you can and giving yourself a strong foundation of self-care before you start. All right. That's all I have to say about that. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for staying and listening. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you want to hear about next. If I missed anything here, if there's any questions, comments, concerns, I would love to hear that feedback and address whatever I can. So thanks again for joining in, and I'll see you next time.